A warrior is somebody who fights for values, has a cause, like knows what they're fighting for, right? Here it's, I'm fighting for the people on my team, right? Like we have this common goal. And so it's about teaching them that balance and that self-advocacy, knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are. And yeah, and I think that this game, you know, teaches so many of those lessons. I had just started like kind of like the perfect job. It was like a new position, so it allowed me to kind of create what I was doing. I was working on a day program for adults with disabilities. And so that's really where I got to flex my like advocacy muscles and, you know, this kind of creative support. I had volunteered at other residential places like in high school, and I knew that that's kind of where I wanted my career to go. And yeah, and I was probably there for maybe 3 or 4 months in this like residential program in Santa Fe, and yeah, it was beautiful and great. And then I was going to be starting counseling, art therapy and counseling in like a few months, and that was when I got diagnosed. And by the time I moved back, that was like when I was supposed to start school. So it was definitely one of those things that there was some beginnings that didn't quite take off. All of a sudden I started kind of having like pain after, like discomfort after I was eating, and it got like worse and worse over about a month, to the point where I missed a couple of days at work, and I don't do that. Came to work and I ended up lying on the ground in one of like the therapist group rooms. She walked in, you know, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm in so much pain," you know, all this stuff. And I was like, "Oh, should I go to the ER?" And she said, "Yeah, if you have to ask, you should go." I got to the ER and they ran all the tests, nothing came back. I got a CT scan, and it was kind of like, this is the last thing that we can do. And if it comes back, you know, with nothing, you know, we gotta have you leave. And luckily this doctor came in and he basically knew exactly what it was, that it wasn't, you know, regular pancreatic cancer. He was like, "Oh, this pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors." That was kind of how it was. I got admitted to the hospital. I was biopsied a few days later, and it did take a little while for the biopsy to come back, just because of the unique factors of my cancer. It was a really intense regimen of radiation, as well as just starting, you know, like regular standardized treatments of just chemo. And so the radiation was palliative to, you know, shrink my tumors as quickly as possible. And since then, basically, yeah, like chemo treatments, I've done a couple of like kind of special radiation treatments. And right now I'm at the end of the standard treatment options I have available to me. You know, for me, like, it's all about relationships. I tell people, you know, if you're searching for a therapist, it's really important to find somebody you vibe with, right? It doesn't matter if they have a PsyD and they're, you know, done all of these things, right? It doesn't matter what their resume looks like if you just don't get along with them, right? You're not going to open up, you're not going to communicate, you're not going to have that relationship. And so I think that it's something similar with, you know, medical professionals. You might be the expert for the chemotherapies and the radiation and the treatments. I'm an expert on myself. I was like really sick, even at the beginning of treatments for like a long time. And I was finally starting to go for like walks again and kind of like rebuild my body at the beginning of the spring in 2020. And so I reached out to Pat, who was my coach in high school. I was just kind of like waiting out COVID and everything like that. And by the next year, that was when I came back here and really started.
Work it, like in between both of the orange and the white. And so you guys can also like switch, you know what I mean? Like you can cut down and be like, my hair, right? Like pop out, right? And like it's just rotating that.
Is a little bit more maybe like a one-way street, I would say, of being like, you got to do this because I have the knowledge, right? Rather than like, and some medical professionals definitely operate in that way. This outlet for me, when I first started playing, you know, way back in the day, like I said, I dealt with a lot of mental health things, and for me it was like that was the outlet. I got to take out my aggression. I got to take out like the rage that I felt in my like little, you know, angsty teenage body. I really remember what it was like to be that angry, depressed, not wanting to be here kid and be on a sports team. You know, so there's been plenty of times where, you know, you can tell something's going on with one of the guys and you go, hey, like, you know, like what's going on? Like you need a minute to talk. I think that, yeah, having that outlet, whether it's sports or art or, you know, just enjoying like movies and stuff, you know, like whatever it is. And I think that that's like so important, not just for like a coping skill or a strategy, but also a distraction. You know, the beauty of the history of lacrosse, of this sport, is that with the indigenous people, part of what lacrosse was to these groups of people, like it was given to them as this ceremony to teach people how to be in balance, to teach young men how to be warriors, or, you know, not like a warrior versus like a soldier, right? A warrior is somebody who fights for values, has a cause, like knows what they're fighting for, right? Like here it's, I'm fighting for my people on my team, right? Like we have this common goal. And so it's about, yeah, like teaching them that balance and that like self-advocacy, knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are. And yeah, and I think that this game, you know, teaches so many of those lessons. I live so much more fully after my diagnosis and this prognosis. My own journey and my own integration with my mental health allowed me to have the skills to want to wake up and, you know, be able to get out of bed when I know that I have this set date, this ultimatum, you know what I mean? Like, how do you find meaning in like each moment? And I think that that was something that I really had to foster with my mental health journey. For me, I definitely tend to view like vulnerability as a strength. There's strength in weakness, there's strength in surrender, in acceptance. But it's really about this radical acceptance of like, this is where I'm at with this disease. The last 4 years, 5 years have been so intense, so beautiful. Like I know myself on so many more deep, like intimate levels. Like I'm so much more comfortable with myself and who I am. And then kind of the result of that is like being able to ride that wave of like, this is horrible right now and this is like not too bad. And this, right, like being able to navigate that, or, you know, knowing myself allowed me to kind of navigate that a little bit better. The way that I advocate is by telling my own story, and for everyone else it's just a story, right? For me it's like my truth or whatever. I get to express like my truth, you know, my experience in a way that I think is beneficial to others. Having these conversations and doing this is like how I kind of view that now.